What if Lot's wife wasn't turned into a pillar of salt at Sodom and Gomorrah? Okay, so I just put out a video about Sodom and Gomorrah being in Utah, not in the Middle East, and I've had lots and lots of comments about Lot's wife and the statue of her that has been found in the Middle East. They think that's Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. So there's a picture of it. If you haven't seen it, I don't find it very convincing. I mean, you can think about it what you want. Also, that's really tall. I looked up how tall it was. It's way taller than at least than a modern day human. Um, Anyway, but I found this article just as I was digging around. I thought it was really interesting, and I had never heard this before, so I wanted to share it. All right, I will put the link to this article in the description, but I'll try to summarize it for you really quickly. So basically, if I'm understanding it right, this guy Hazuni is challenging the interpretation of this passage in the Bible. He's saying that passage is not clear. Verses 25 and 26 say he annihilated those cities and the entire plain and all the inhabitants of the cities and the vegetation of the ground. Lot's wife looked back, Vatihi, I'm sure I'm not saying that right, I apologize, a pillar of salt. And then he goes on to say, given that Lot's wife is the most recent subject of the sentence, our instinct is to translate that word as, and she became. Yet Hazuni applies it instead to the subject of the previous verse, which is the cities of the plain. So he's applying this word, instead of applying it to Lot's wife, he's applying it to the cities down below. So he suggests an alternative reading, right down here, would be Lot's wife looked back and the entire land had become a pillar of salt, as found in Deuteronomy 29:22, where it says all its soil devastated by sulfur and salt. So this interpretation actually leaves Lot's wife still alive, and this narrative is not recorded to illustrate a punishment. And it talks about that earlier in the article too, how her punishment for looking back seems pretty extreme, especially seeing as Lot himself disobeyed the angels earlier and wasn't punished for it. But anyway, it says the narrative is not recorded to illustrate a punishment, but to provide us with a dramatic scene where it kind of reveals the destruction below, so it's just describing what's going on. And then it goes on and suggests that the word, I'm sorry, I can't say that either, netziv, I apologize. But anyway, the word in verse 26, which is typically translated as pillar, may also be translated as garrison, which is based on the words occurrence and chronicles. So that would mean it translates as she is met with the image of a cold, menacing, eternally desolate stare of city walls covered in salt. So in summary, he's suggesting the translation is not saying Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt for punishment, rather that she turned and observed her hometown being turned into a garrison or a fortress or a block or pillar of salt, and it was all destroyed. Which honestly makes a lot more sense, and especially in context with, her punished, why was she turned to pillar of salt? Anyway, I just saw this article. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I just thought it was interesting, and I also thought it was a really good example of how we've been talking about questioning our assumptions, digging a little bit past what we have assumed things to mean and what the intent and purpose behind them is, and how that can change the entire narrative around the locations as well. So I just thought this was a cool example of that, how we're basing our assumptions of where this place is and what we should be looking for on what we have been told this story means. And we need to actually learn more about the translation and question for ourselves if we think it's translated properly. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting. I'd love to hear what you guys think.